As our final discussion of the day will be a spotlight on the future of e-commerce in ASEAN. We have My Skills Foundation, a Malaysian non-profit organization that empowers at-risk youth through holistic education and vocational training, as well as character development. We also have Cloth Circularity outside, a women-led social enterprise in Malaysia focused on promoting a circular economy through textile and plastic recycling, as well as Eats, Shoots and Roots, which is a Malaysian social enterprise dedicated to reconnecting urban communities with nature through edible gardening. And from my understanding, they did do a composting project at the Bursa office recently. I've just bought some seeds from there if you're planning to grow your own garden. Please welcome to stage Catherine Lim, Head of Asian Equities of Bloomberg Intelligence. To stage, as long as Hussaini Saifee will be coming on later on with their respective expertise to highlight how ASEAN can scale digital trade, strengthen economic resilience, and capitalize on the region's demographic and technological advantages. And they'll both come together later for a final discussion. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for the final panel. I'm Catherine Lim, Senior Consumer and E-commerce Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. For those of you who joined the morning panels, you will be somewhat familiar with Bloomberg Intelligence, and we are the research arm of Bloomberg. My colleague Robert Lear was on stage earlier sharing insights on AI and moderating a very interesting discussion on the topic. I'm excited to actually uphold this momentum and bring you another fast-evolving space, e-commerce, especially through the lens of Chinese platforms expanding across Southeast Asia. So let's head straight to the macro context of this. We have heard from Professor Tan from NTU, Julian Yeo from DHL Express earlier this morning, very well moderated by Erica, on the tariff war and the US-China rivalry. And really, President Trump's sweeping tariffs across the world, literally, particularly made in China goods, and the recent removal of the US de minimis duty exemption significantly raised the barriers for Chinese consumer goods exporter. Now, if I can bring your attention to the pie chart, on the left-hand side. Now, that is one that actually shows the breakdown by geographies of China cross-border e-commerce exports. Some of you may be wondering, like, cross-border e-commerce? Well, essentially, that refers to goods sold online from sellers in one country to buyers in another. And, it's essentially, what drives the business models of AliExpress, Temu, Shein, and even JD Worldwide. But, essentially, what we are actually looking at right now is that US accounts for 37% of China's cross-border e-commerce exports. And this is a meaningful size. We're going to go down, to talk about, why this is so big. See, US tariffs hikes on Chinese goods wasn't the only key disruptor to cross-border e-commerce export. It was really also the abolishment of the US high de minimis threshold. Looking at the table, on the slide right now, you will see that this threshold of $800 is huge compared to what we see in Europe at 162, South Korea at 150. So relative to the rest of the world, it was so much easier selling goods to US without having to be taxed or having to pay duties. Now, another key aspect is that because of this rule itself, sellers will not be subjected to the cumbersome compliance, customs, reportings and requirements. And truly, this was a loophole that has now closed. So with that, and again, the tariffs, the closure of the de minimis loophole in US, we have seen overall Chinese exports falling as depicted by, the green line. And I'd like to bring your attention to the blue line here, because that represents, the growth in the past couple of years prior to 2025. The strong growth of China cross-border e-commerce exports, outside of to the country, to the rest of the world. And where it is right now, and again, the blue line, really shows US alone, this line would have actually fallen more steeply than total US-bound exports for reasons of the very deep-rooted dependence on the American consumers by the cross-border e-commerce exporters in China. The reality is that it takes time to build logistics, and it also takes time to actually reaccustom to compliance regulations in other markets. The good news is that, the Chinese firms are gradually shifting. The progress is there, but again, because of historical reasons, legacies reasons, the progress could be slow. We've heard about trade agreements, in the earlier sessions, and, without a doubt, China has and continues to actively strike new bilateral agreements outside of US, and they are looking to actually enable, strong export growth beyond US. So the recent data, which is what is shown here on the slide, actually shows that, there is a strong shipment growth to regions like Europe, look at France, you get Germany, and developed Asia like Japan. Now, there is a need to actually do this, in case you are wondering, because export has been a major cornerstone of China's economic growth, and especially for the millions of small and mid-sized factories that depend on overseas demand. So again, striking these new bilateral trade agreements will help keep production lines running and offer new lifelines for these exporters. And so it is not just about geopolitics, it's about safeguarding jobs and sustaining growth across China's manufacturing heartlands. So what do I now look at, if I'm actually following e-commerce globally, right? This is a tracker that myself, my team, we follow very closely. And as you can see, we are seeing a spike. And if I go from left to right, you're essentially looking at the changes in GDP-adjusted MAUs for Temu, Alibaba, Amazon, Shein, and TikTok. So, essentially, when we adjust for GDP, which is something that my team does, we look at platform performance, across the region, and we come to the conclusion that it's important not to just focus on the raw active users numbers. Because, to give a better context, we need to adjust for GDP per capita, which serves as a proxy for spending power. Now, a platform may have millions of users in a lower income market, but if average purchasing power is limited, the actual revenue contribution per user may not be that significant. So when we show GDP-adjusted MAU as what you see on this slide, it helps us understand better where engagement translates into monetizable demand and not just the digital reach. So, to put into context right now, if I look at, IMF's data, GDP per capita in Southeast Asia will only reach 7% that of US on an average, 18% of Europe, and 61% of Latin America this year. So again, it is a reflection that, in this region itself, something to bear in mind as we look at e-commerce is the lowest consumer spending power and probably a high reliance on low prices and promotions to drive volumes. Southeast Asia is strategically still very attractive to the Chinese platforms, don't get me wrong. Again, we all know about the geographical proximity. It really enables faster fulfillment, lower shipping cost, smoother logistics integration. And while spending per shopper, as I've highlighted earlier, is lower than that in US or Europe, the savings in supply chain can be meaningful. And so you're looking at being able to actually scale up the presence in Southeast Asia with decent return on investment for many of these Chinese platforms. And just some numbers, for you to actually take away with if we go a bit of a longer term. The digital gap between, Southeast Asia and China will be closing. And in 2024, China's e-commerce GMV already accounts for, 9.6% of its GDP, far ahead of the peers in this region, which is trailing at about, 4+%. Even the US, we are looking at 6.6% of its e-commerce GMV to its GDP, based on our estimates. The good news is that the popular survey that's being done by, and projections done by Google, Temasek, and Bain and Company shows that if you actually put the numbers in itself by 2030, Southeast Asia leading markets will actually have a ratio that is very close to where China is right now. And a couple of markets to actually take note of, Thailand and Philippines, as well as Vietnam. And again, just to come back to this slide again, just bear in mind that, gross GMV, gross merchandise volume of Southeast Asia to the global e-commerce platforms like Temu, Shein will likely still be small if you actually adjust for GDP. I'm going to end off with this slide that again shows you, the year-on-year growth in the last 12 months, ending May 2025, of the Southeast Asia monthly active users by the key platforms itself. And you will see, again, what focus on the turquoise line, you will see a number that is 264, and that is the monthly active users for Shopee as of May 2025. It still leads in Southeast Asia, by far compared to the rest of the other platforms in the region. But again, do bear in mind that if you then look at the yellow line itself, which is based against the axis on the right-hand side for reasons that Temu's growth has been phenomenal, in key markets like Philippines, as well as Thailand, the platform is essentially, more than tripling its MAU in the region just based on Philippines and Thailand. Now, we all know the issues that it is facing in Indonesia and Vietnam, and this will probably be a topic that we can actually cover later. So, let me hand it over to Hussaini, Saifee, the head of ASEAN TMT at Maybank, for more color and more spotlight into Southeast Asia e-commerce as he followed closely some of the key platforms in this region. Hussaini, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. My name is Hussaini Saifee, and I cover the TMT sector here at Maybank. If we can have my slides, I will maybe zoom in a little bit more on the ASEAN e-commerce space. So, yeah, so I have a few generic slides. First is that I'm a big bull on the ASEAN e-commerce space, and it's essentially reflected in the fact that the growth here has been phenomenal. During the COVID time, the growth was super strong. Then there was a bit of in 2023, there was a bit of a normalization. And after that, we are again seeing a strong growth. And what we also see is that the projected growth is almost 15% CAGR for the next 6 to 7 years. And if we see the same for Shopee, which is the largest platform, they had been growing their GMV at almost 25% last year. And for this year, the projection is for 20%. So what we are seeing essentially is that this region remains quite strong from the e-commerce growth point of view. And the reason for this growth is that if we see on the lower chart, as a percentage of retail spend in ASEAN is just 13%. And this compares to more evolved markets like, say, China and US, which are in the range of 25 to 30%. So ASEAN has essentially a long runway for growth, and we essentially see a very strong growth going forward. Now, how the ASEAN landscape looks like, and I will go a bit more detail into what Catherine was mentioning about the influx of Chinese e-commerce players into this space. So ASEAN is mainly led by Shopee, with almost 52% market share, GMV market share. And we did conducted a survey very recently, which is on the left-hand side bottom. The question was, which is your preferred e-commerce platform? And 84% of the survey respondents said that it was Shopee. TikTok Shop was almost half of that. And Lazada, which at one point was a dominant player, it is now 1/3 of Shopee. So Shopee is leading the platform. The second is TikTok Shop, which entered ASEAN in 2021. And they are now the second largest, and a part of their growth was also linked to the fact that they acquired Tokopedia in Indonesia, which catapulted them to number 2. They are growing at a faster clip, but the big part of their growth was mainly because of the acquisition of Tokopedia. Lazada, again, is losing market share. It is now 1/3 of Shopee. And finally, the important part right now is that we are seeing a phase of rational competition in ASEAN. And that rational competition has allowed the platforms to increase the seller take rate, the commission which the sellers have to share with the platforms. And if you see on the right-hand side, the seller commission rate at the same time last year was just 5.8% on an average. Now it has increased to 9.2%. Okay, so it has increased quite a lot, and that is a reflection of the overall competitive rationality in the market. This is my final slide, and it reflects that there are investor concerns that quite a bit of Chinese companies, as Catherine mentioned, that likes of Temu, Shein, AliExpress, they are coming to this part of the world. Okay, and the question is that are they going to disrupt or not? In our view, the risk of disruption is very limited. And the reason is that the average basket size is small. So the way this cross-border platform like Temu and Shein, they work is that they ship from China directly to the consumer's home here in ASEAN. But the point is that the basket size in ASEAN is just around $8, okay, for Temu. And $4.3 is almost the shipping cost. So given very high shipping costs relative to the basket size, we are of the view that the unit economics are relatively unviable for the likes of Temu and Shein. In US, it does make sense, because in US, the average basket size is $40. So it makes sense that even with after paying $9 in shipping costs, the leftover $31 is quite big for them to make the unit economics work. Okay, so because of this high shipping cost relative to the basket size, we are of the view that the unit economics are unfavorable for these players. We also did this price sampling in ASEAN. So Temu is present in Thailand, Philippines, and Malaysia. And if we compare the product pricing of Temu to that of Shopee, what we find is that Temu's pricing is 12% more than that of Shopee. So the point is that Temu is not very competitive in this part of the world, and the shipping costs are relatively unfavorable. So net-net, we are of the view that ASEAN is very favorably placed from the growth point of view. The competition remains quite rational, which is allowing them to increase the seller take rates, and the risk from the likes of Chinese players like Temu and Shein is limited given the high shipping costs relative to the basket size. Okay, so this ends my presentation. Let me invite Catherine back to the stage for Q&A. Let me start with the Q&A, and I can see some questions coming on the Speedo as well. So maybe Catherine, if I can start on the global side, like, how significant was the impact of the US de minimis rule change on Chinese exporters like Temu and Shein?
Right, Hussaini, I was like, looking at your comparison, the whole economics of, your thesis that it doesn't quite make sense for Temu to come into this market from a cost perspective. And you know what? That is what we have actually seen Temu and PDD doing. And it is taking such a toll on their financials that I guess, to what you've highlighted earlier, they look like they are looking to actually give up profit gains or profits for that matter. They are still profitable, for the matter, except that, it's a double-digit profit decline, and you are looking at PDD as a whole, and of course that includes their China business itself, suffering more than 10 percentage points operating margins decline. And that has to come from Temu going into the rest of the world. So, we're looking to see what Shein's number shows, assuming it is successful in listing in Hong Kong. I think 2 days ago, we've seen the news over the wires that Shein has confidentially filed for an IPO in Hong Kong. So, let's see what comes out of that by the end of the year. But it does, to Hussaini's original question, it is taking a toll on their financials numbers. But the backdrop is, as I've highlighted, China is making a push to make sure that, the factories continue to run, there continue to be jobs for the millions of, not just the factories, but for the workers out there. So that is the reality of it. And, even if the economics doesn't make sense, and I agree with you, Hussaini, it might be one that they are willing to give up profits just for that top line growth.
Understood. So then the related question is, how are Temu and Shein adjusting their logistics and sourcing strategies in response to rising regulatory scrutiny in the West?
Yeah, that's a great question because, what we have observed, and not totally in this part of the world, Southeast Asia particularly, but we have actually seen them work with third-party logistics partners to actually set up, warehouses, whether it's bonded together with local governments whether in US, in parts of US, in Europe, etc. So they are making logistical arrangements, and I've actually spoken to some of these third-party logistic partners, whereby they are all out to make sure that they have this logistics solutions for you, right down from the factories to the last mile, depending on who you speak to. More importantly, I think from a business model perspective, and we've written about this, about Temu's evolving business model, ranging from they started off doing full consignment. Basically, the factories give Temu your stuff, they will do all the selling for you, from marketing, etc. That's what we call full consignment. Then they moved to partial consignment, whereby they were on the hunt for sellers who actually had, logistic solutions already at the destination countries. So they've actually offloaded some of this and became more flexible. And to this date, we have actually seen, and that was in April, Temu started a new business model whereby, they are looking for US registered entities to start selling things. And, again, there were solutions whereby some of these sellers, they have their Chinese roots, they have goods that's readily in US, they can sell on Temu. So, they've circumvented some of these regulations, right? So much so that, Hussaini, I think to your question itself, it is still evolving. I'll just like to drop a final note on Shein. And again, Shein is a bit of a different animal because they have the direct selling part for the fashion and the apparel, which is their forte. Now they're looking to actually expand into other merchandise, to broaden that assortment, whether it's household goods, etc. So that would likely be more third party versus, they themselves doing it. Yep. So, Hussaini, actually going back to you, again, it's intriguing, your findings, from the surveys, etc. And really, so many things in, what stood out most for you from that survey itself? And, any results that particularly make you feel more constructive or actually more cautious about, the sector's near-term trajectory?
Yeah, sure. So if we can have the slides, please. So what we have done is that we conducted a survey across 6 markets in ASEAN, surveying more than 220 consumers. And here are the key findings. So one of the questions we asked was like, when they buy online, when consumers buy online, whether they buy necessity or discretionary item. So what we found is that a big part, almost 41% of the consumers are buying more necessities than discretionary compared to consumers who are buying more of necessities than discretionary. Okay, so 41% are saying that they buy more necessity than discretionary, 33% are saying that they are buying more discretionary than necessity, which kind of indicates that the defensiveness of this sector, okay, that even in the times of market turmoil or economic weakness, consumers are buying necessity, so the defensiveness of this sector is high. Similarly, if you see on the top pie chart, the question we asked was that as the online prices, product prices have gone up, what the consumers' response to that was. 50% of the consumers are saying that yes, the prices have gone up, but still they find that the online prices remain cheaper compared to offline. Okay, so consumers are increasingly getting more and more dependent, and they are liking online because they are thinking that online is cheaper compared to offline. Some other findings are that the question we asked to the sellers on the platform, that how do they feel about the recent increase in seller take rates or seller commissions by these platforms. So we mentioned that the commission rate has increased from 6% to 9%, but still the 31% of the sellers are very positive despite commission rate increase. And this came as a very positive surprise for us, that despite commission rate increases, sellers are positive. And a small portion are negative. So what this suggests is that the commission rate increase was very well accepted by the sellers, and sellers are not feeling distressed as the commission rate has increased. And one other question we asked to the sellers is that if there is more commission rate increase going forward, what would be their response? And a majority of them are saying that they will simply pass on the higher prices, higher commission rate onto the consumers. So net-net, we are of the view that the results were quite positive, and that leads us to the conclusion that the commission, so these are the commission rate in these various parts of the world. Okay, and as you can see that of Shopee and Tokopedia, or which is TikTok Shop, is on the lower side. On the extreme right are Chinese players. Chinese players have very less or very low commission rate, but after Chinese, it's the ASEAN names who has the lower commission rate. So we are of the view that given the positive response we are getting from the consumers as well as from the sellers, and given the fact that the commission rates, despite increases, is lower in ASEAN, there is room for further commission rate increase in ASEAN. So we came very positive from the survey.
So Hussaini, we have a couple of questions online, and I think you might be in a better position to answer this. Are you expecting the future basket size in ASEAN to increase?
No, I don't think that the basket size on a blended basis to increase. I don't think so. And the main reason for that is that the base is becoming wider and wider. So as you go more deeper into lower income level of the market or the society, then those consumers will be buying cheaper products. So yes, means the existing users' basket size must be going up, and AI does play a role in increasing the basket size. But given the fact that they are increasing the base, lower income consumers are joining the base, I'm of the view that the basket size is likely to kind of go down or maybe remain stable at this point in time. But overall, the growth remains super strong in our view.
Got it. And, if I can actually jump on and answer two questions together, because, there's one that actually asks, how much of total China monthly exports to respective countries are e-commerce related goods? Now, I look forward to sharing more on this because my team is currently churning through 10,000 over HSI codes right now when it comes to exports to actually try and get to this number. We're in the process of that. Now, of course, it's not going to be a significant number because we're going by value. And the value of consumer goods, as Hussaini and myself, we've actually keep alluding to, these are your basic stuff. It's not your high value item, particularly since, if those are actually calculated based on your factory prices. So the percentage is not going to be huge. But this is an exercise that we are also very interested, from Bloomberg perspective, to have on a terminal so that we can actually share with you. Now, related to exports again, before I hand it over to Hussaini, how has Chinese exports to EU and Africa work? And is it by partnering with more domestic logistic partners? Do you see that applying for Southeast Asia countries? EU is a complicated, region. And what I can say is that Germany, Poland, Ireland, some of the new markets that Temu has actually ventured into, they are doing great. What are they selling? Essentially, anything and everything. The good news is that, going back to basket sizes, which Hussaini has actually alluded to, depends on what you're actually selling. Because if you're in a position to actually ship your big furniture from your Chinese factories to EU, and these are in good demand, particularly outdoor furnitures, whether it's your picnic tables, and increasingly, I was at a exhibition, whereby they were hosting a visiting group from Africa, and it was mentioned that Africa is in need of musical instruments, ukulele, drums, guitar. And, that is something that, kind of like take you by surprise that, I didn't know that, there's a big demand for that in Africa. So, again, the entire merchandise mix is expanding, and do not underestimate the impact of social media and how it is influencing, consumers globally, and for them to actually pick up certain habits, or consumption behavior if they have not. And, whether do I see it applying for Southeast Asia countries? Hussaini might be in a better position to answer that than I do. But, again, the possibility is there. I think that was back that was back in January, etc. Again, speaking to one of the sellers. There were things that, whether it's, in line with the religions here in Southeast Asia, these are very new and niche items for some of the Chinese sellers, but they are also very keen to actually produce them in bulk so that, they can actually scale up and, lower the cost of, producing such new stuff.
Yeah, sure, Catherine, thanks. And let me take the final question, which is actually on the ride-hailing and food delivery side. Question is that, what are your thoughts on the competitive landscape for ride-hailing and food delivery in Indonesia? And what are your thoughts on Goto and TikTok? As such, the overall ride-hailing and food delivery space, similar to e-commerce, is in a very good shape. Competition has been quite rational. And what we have seen, and we do track the pricing in Indonesia on a regular basis, and what we are seeing is that the pricing of ride-hailing in Indonesia is actually going up. And what we also see is that compared to Gojek, the Grab pricing is more cheaper. But net-net, the focus of both the companies is to relatively increase pricing, and the competition remains quite rational. The growth again is in the range of around 10 to 15% and maybe more than that quite easily. So again, the market remains quite healthy. Same is the case on the food delivery side in Indonesia as well. Now, the question is that what are our thoughts on Goto and TikTok? I'm not sure if it is Goto and TikTok or Goto and Grab, because there had been quite a bit of speculation and discussion that Grab and Goto are likely to merge. But both the companies have denied that, so we don't know. But we are of the view that and we have done quite a bit of research on that side, that if Goto and Grab merges, then it will be positive, especially for Grab. And in our research, we are of the view that it can help to increase Grab's NPV by around 12%. So we remain very positive if at all Grab and Goto merges, although both the companies have denied for now.
Well, Hussaini, talk about food delivery and ride-hailing. You and I, we can have another session together, for me sharing what's happening in China on that front and you on Southeast Asia.
Yeah, means we have already exceeded the time, but I do understand that Chinese players are going outside of China, like Meituan, Didi, and that is also raising quite a bit of question that are they going to come to ASEAN or not? Similar to Temu and Shein. So yeah, that remains one of the key investor concerns as well.
Okay, we're going to save that for next year. Yeah? Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine and Hussaini. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. If you both could step forward for a quick photo opportunity. Our final session of the day. Another resounding round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. This round of applause is for each of you as well, for making it through right to the very end. Congratulations. Thank you for your patience.